Good afternoon. My name is George Topoulos. I am a Senior Fellow at the Centre International de Formation Européenne in Nice and the Begich and Dad Center for Strategic Studies in Israel. And it's my great honor to moderate this discussion today with distinguished speakers. It's a very good opportunity, I believe, to focus on regional cooperation in the COVID-19 era. This is the objective of our online meeting, to see what countries, in this case in the Black Sea region, can do together in order to deal with a problem that is affecting the international community. And by looking for synergies, I believe that the Black Sea region can constitute an interesting example on how countries can join hands and overcome this problem at the public health level, as well as regarding the mitigation of the impact on the economies. The event today, due to the circumstances, this means that what we are gonna do is that all speakers will make initial interventions, and then with a reverse order, we'll start our debate on the basis of questions that our audience, and as far as I know, there are many people who are very interested in this event, will ask. The role of the moderator is not to talk, and therefore I will very quickly present our distinguished speakers, starting with Ambassador CHRISTIDES, who is the Secretary General of the Permanent International Secretariat of the Organization of the Black Sea and Economic Cooperation, Mr. Daniel MITOV, the Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria, Ambassador George CIAMBA, the Ambassador of Romania in the Hellenic Republic, the Ambassador Selim Yened, now President of the Global Relations Forum, and last but not least, Dr. Sergei Zabelin, Senior Research Fellow at the Department of Black Sea and Mediterranean Studies at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Ambassador CHRISTIDES, the floor is yours for your initial remarks on our theme of regional cooperation in the Black Sea region.
Thank you very much, Professor. Well, I wish to make an inaugural statement, and then perhaps I don't want to get mixed up in the discussion of our distinguished guests. In any case, let me first thank the International Center for Black Sea Studies, and especially its Director General, for embracing our initiative to co-organize this webinar. I also wish to thank you, Mr. Moderator, for accepting this delicate task. And of course, I want to express my gratitude to the distinguished speakers of today's event, some of whom are also very good friends. Minister MITOV, during his tenure as Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria, has been very, very attentive to our organization, as was also Minister CIAMBA when he was Minister for European Affairs. And of course, the same goes for Ambassador Yenel, who has also, apart from his EU experience, a very important, let me say, knowledge on the BSEC organization itself, as he has served as its first Deputy Secretary General. And of course, I want to welcome Dr. Sergei Zabelin, who is with us today. Let me say that the idea of organizing this webinar matured after the first month of the coronavirus lockdown, which brought us all back at home with much more time to think and reflect. So as the Secretary General of an international regional organization that promotes the economic cooperation among its member states, I asked myself how this economic cooperation could be implemented under these dramatic conditions. in order to address some of the most crucial challenges that all member states faced, like the supply of vital health provisions, the exchange of important information concerning the pandemic, keeping the transport of food and medical supplies open, and so on. My initial observation was that the unforeseen magnitude and the rapidity of the pandemic's outbreak surprised most of the countries, which immediately tried their best to make sure that they can address the urgent issues at home. Well, this was an understandable expression of instinctive self-preservation, let me put it like that. Even our rather modest suggestion to have an exchange of vital information concerning the virus's outbreak among member states was politely overlooked, due exactly to the focus of all national resources in solving the internal issues, which is perfectly comprehensible. And of course, this was not only the case with BSEC, this was the case in even bigger organizations, like for instance, the EU. I remember hearing 2 days ago in a webinar, the commissioner responsible for neighborhood and enlargement, who openly said that the EU remained very introvert at the beginning of the pandemic. And in fact, in a very interesting report of the European Policy Institute's network, in the introduction, you might read, and I quote, "The COVID-19 crisis has shown how difficult European cooperation can be. At first, all member states were inward-looking in their reactions, unilaterally closing borders and focusing on crisis management at home. European solidarity has largely been absent." So I believe that this was understandably also the case with BSEC member states. Yet today I believe that things are changing. For instance, we are very happy and glad that we are preparing 2 very important video meetings in the very near future. One has to do with tourism. We will be bringing together high-level representatives from all our member states in order to see how we can work and agree on a concrete framework of joint measures and action in order to gradually allow tourism to resume among our member states, since all of our member states have managed to contain the spread of the coronavirus with success. The second one will have to do with the facilitation of road transport. We want to make sure that goods, food, and medical supplies can easily be transported between and among our member states. So you see, we are moving in the right direction. In conclusion to this intervention, and in very general terms, I think it is obvious that the coronavirus outbreak has dramatically exposed previously existing fractions and tensions around the globe. No need to name them here. And it has certainly also put multilateral cooperation to a new and very severe test. I believe that the crisis has shown the need for more cooperation and coordination, not only between states, but also within the states. And I believe that the crisis has provided us with several lessons for how we should approach other issues of global scale, such as the climate change. Now, some analysts argue that at the end of all this, international cooperation will come out stronger and with more solid structures to support it. And of course, this is also our hope in what concerns regional cooperation, and especially cooperation among the members of our BSEC organization. I'm confident that the discussion among the distinguished and very knowledgeable speakers of today can offer valuable ways and means in order to achieve this goal. So, Mr. Moderator, let me give the floor back to you so that we can hear our speakers and their views on all these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador CHRISTIDES, for providing these enlightening remarks. One of the main reasons why I was very happy in participating in this discussion with you is that we are going to discuss about cooperation and synergies in a period of rising uncertainty at the world level. So I believe that the message today will be that countries can work together in order to respond to problems. And having said that, I'd like to give the floor to all our speakers, starting with the former Foreign Minister of Bulgaria, Mr. MITOV. You can make your initial remarks focusing on how, from your own perspective, you value the importance of cooperation at the regional level in these difficult times. Mr. Mitov, the floor is yours. We don't hear you. Your microphone, please. You need to...
I needed to unmute, of course. First, I wanted to express my gratitude to BSEC and to Ambassador CHRISTIDES for the invitation. It's always wonderful to be among friends and to discuss such important issues. As it was rightly mentioned previously by the ambassador, when it comes to this particular crisis or crisis of this magnitude, they not necessarily bring anything new, but they for sure deepen and expose previously accumulated tensions and give velocity to previously known tendencies. So to me, it will be extremely interesting to explore a little bit more those tendencies which are global but concern our regional formats on which we are focusing today. So one of those tendencies is, of course, and we can't avoid that, and we see it every single day, is the so-called crisis of trust in the international environment. Now we see accusations and a lot of tension around information might have been hidden initially or underestimated when it comes to the spread of the virus. Then, of course, comes the question how the governments in this particular moment gather and announce statistical data related to the infected and those who died with COVID-19. If international manipulation of data gets proven, some countries could find themselves in further isolation long after the main crisis is gone. Because a lot of the states will start asking themselves questions: shall we open our borders to countries who might have actually not dealt yet with the crisis? And even the status of such countries in the international institutions could be influenced and damaged by such events. Second, the competition for vaccine could lead to the so-called vaccine nationalism. The cure could be used as a geopolitical tool, and that needs to be avoided at all costs. And the voice of every organization or authority is important here. BSEC needs to, in my opinion, look seriously in that direction. Recently, also, we have witnessed appalling hackings of the digital infrastructure of hospitals and laboratories, either working on vaccines or dealing with infected people. Such a phenomenon needs to be harshly addressed by the national governments and international organizations, including BSEC. Here, of course, the cooperation in the area of healthcare and science, I believe, in BSEC has also a lot of potential. It is clear as well that the concept of the domination of an absolute national sovereignty, which stands on top of everything else in international relations, is failing once again historically. To somehow illustrate what I mean, is that the idea which was promoted rigorously recently, that whatever happens inside a nation concerns only that nation and no one else needs to interfere, that idea is obviously deeply misguided, because whatever happens in a nation obviously concerns the whole world. Whether we are going to talk about the virus itself or other phenomena, that is a matter of everyone. The problems need to be out in the open. We have also seen that, and I believe that's a tendency which little by little is deepening, that the attitude towards China is going to, and other authoritarian or totalitarian regimes, is going to change and shift in a direction of diminishing the political and economic dependence from China, especially in this case, and the withdrawal of production capacities from China is going to increase. Here, BSEC as an organization probably needs to also look at what kind of opportunities will open for the region when certain companies are going to start moving their production capacities and looking for other destination in order to place those production capacities. We have also seen that in terms of values, the security of the citizens is going to be a priority of the nation states and in the frameworks of political and military alliances as well. The price of the human life has risen dramatically, and people are ready to bear temporary limitation of their freedoms in the name of their safety and security. For sure, we will see new technologies which are going to enter our lives as permanent phenomenons, as we have witnessed in 2001 after the attacks on the World Trade Center. The security of the airports has become something that we have not seen before, and that has become part of our daily lives. Maybe part of the technological advancements which has been used right now in the fight against the virus are going to become a permanent part of our lives. For sure, regional formats can also try and tackle and discuss in their own formats how to help each other's economic recovery after the crisis is over. Those states which support small and middle enterprises and maintain the capacity of their citizens to meet the demands in the market are going to get out of the economic crisis way faster than others. For sure, another tendency will be that the expertise is going to be valued way more. Science and experts, competent people, basing their opinions and their decisions on science and facts, are going to be way more valued than the clairvoyants and the charlatans, which from time to time influence our daily public lives. Another tendency which is for sure noteworthy is that how the global institutional infrastructure is going to change. For sure, we will witness a crisis in that regard. On the one hand, right now the borders might be closed, but we see that the cooperation which we are using right now, the cooperation in terms of exchange of information has not stopped. Actually, it's increasing. So the borders, the physical borders might be temporarily closed, but there are no borders for the technological advancements and the communication between the people. In this case, with the crisis, we have seen how globalization and the globalized economy has basically brought economic prosperity, and the crisis with the virus has clearly demonstrated to us that there's no alternative to more and more deepening of global markets. But probably the rules will be different. Probably the rules need to be, and the way how international organizations operate needs to change. There are a lot of questions towards the World Health Organization. There are a lot of questions towards the United Nations in this case and its role. And those are absolutely necessary organizations, but for sure the call for reform there will be immense. And finally, the nations and the global institutions for decades have neglected the danger from global pandemic. The investment was mainly in weapons, missiles, and all sorts of hardware defense mechanisms, and turns out you can't bombard the virus with the missiles. So the investment on national and regional level needs to be for sure rethought. And in the end, after we need to keep an eye on that, and BSEC as a regional organization as well. After the crisis, after the pandemic lockdown, some of the governments might be tempted not to return the full range of freedoms and rights to their citizens, which need to be safeguarded, and international organizations need to be. You need to keep an eye on that for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your talk and for placing the discussion about the novel coronavirus in the context of international cooperation, geopolitics, as well as economics. I see that questions from our participants are coming. I encourage all the ones who are attending our event to send your questions, even if we do not have the chance to discuss them today. It will be a good opportunity for future events. If I may, please also identify yourselves in the questions, so our speakers will be aware on who is addressing the question. Now I give the floor to Ambassador of Romania, the Hellenic Republic, George CIAMBA. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you all. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this webinar. You know, Romania is at the helm of the BSEC. I think, you know, our presidency, so to say, has been disrupted by the coronavirus. It was supposed to be a follow-up of our presidency of the Council in 2019. I think most of the themes that we put forward are very valid today. It's about interconnectivity, it's about cohesion. I think I would like to thank Daniel for having an extended presentation of how it stands all over the world about the coronavirus. I think what is important now is to see what BSEC could do. I think, and in a way, what would be the value or disruption that could be useful for BSEC in trying to plan its future works. You know, in a way, as Ambassador CHRISTIDES was saying, it's an economic organization, so I think it has a lot of role to play, especially in these times. We have to, in the same time, to recognize that, you know, the fact that Romania, Bulgaria and Greece are members of the Union, and the Union now is coming with quite a comprehensive approach to the economic aftermath of the coronavirus crisis, and trying, to come with a very generous and in the same time, I think it's a dedicated response, and we should welcome the French-German initiative of yesterday that could bring a value added not only for the countries, but as well would bring a value added for the region. It's an important factor that has not to be forgotten. We as well have to go and look into what we have done at the individual, at the level of states. I think I just want to mention that Romania, was giving an extensive package of aid and the humanitarian aid and support for Republic of Moldova. I think this has happened between many of the member states countries on a bilateral basis, but for Romania it was very important that we should not only focus on us, and I think this is what was the message, especially in the last period of time. Should not be only the focus on us, should be the focus as well on our neighbors, should be the focus on the region, should be the focus on our friends and partners. We have to recognize there is a lot of economic uncertainty, what is going to happen. And everybody now is trying to see this region is sharing some key industries. We speak now, there is a lot of importance given these days to tourism. I think we should as well focus not only at the level of the Balkans, of the Western Balkans, not only at the level of the Union, but as well at the level of BSEC, more on the tourism. It's because, in order to have tourism, you need a facilitator, and you need to have a common set of norms, both for transportation and as well trying to stay safe in the same time to enjoy the tourism market that is one of the main contributors to the region, we should say, for the GDP of the region, but in the same time to try to provide the sanitary conditions and the procedures that would make it safe to travel. There is a big discussion in Europe about transportation. I think as well we have to couple this kind of discussion at the level of the BSEC, because at the end of the day, whatever rules we'd like to have in the Union, we have to recognize that most of the tourists that are coming to the region are from the European Union, so it would be very important to be followed up at the level of the BSEC. But of course, BSEC, there were a lot of other regional organizations that were not prepared. There were many international organizations that were not prepared. Of course, BSEC was not prepared. Nobody was prepared for the coronavirus crisis. But it's important if there is what kind of opportunity you get out of it. It's very important as well that we had an idea, I think, many years ago in BSEC that could be better taken stock now, which is about the crisis, civilian crisis management, and how we are going to exchange information. One of the things that we noticed, even in the Union, that the day after, everybody was imposing different types of limitations of the freedom of movement, or types of limitations to what you can do and where you can travel. There was not so much information. I think it's very important the exchange of information, and it's very important that when you have a regional organization, even if you cannot put all the norms together, to try to find a way to communicate the information to one from the other. In a way, I think some of the things that were already mentioned should be taken very serious. At these times, the stability and the solidarity are equally important. It's very important not to politically to have the stability and not to try to make any kind of gestures that would disrupt, politically speaking, the cooperation. I think, we had a good example in the past, if I remember, the famous earthquake diplomacy. I think sometimes there is an opportunity out of a civilian crisis that could put together on a regional level some countries that were not looking exactly eye to eye to the same type of issues. And I think this is where I should encourage the Secretary General of BSEC to take the lead, and be sure that us as a chairman would like as well to take the lead in trying to to make to take all the advantages that could be so out of this crisis and to transform this kind of challenge in a plus. There are, we should try to take care that we are looking into all the aspects that were already, so to say, highlighted and underlined that are stemming out of the crisis. I should say about, now I speak about misinformation, fake news. I think it's very important in the region. In this part of the world, it's very important that, we could come, not with a common approach, but at least we'd like to try to, to disseminate the lessons learned and good practices about making the difference between fake news, misinformation, and, creating panic in our citizens, and what are good practices and good procedures for moving forward. We have to recognize that, the coronavirus has hit unequally the member states of the BSEC organization. I think we have some countries and that have fared pretty well. I think there are other countries that as well, now they have a very extensive experience of dealing with the coronavirus, and they were very as well energetic in tackling with the sanitary crisis. Overall, if I look into it, I say that most of our member states were doing a lot better, so to say, than other members in terms of, first of all, healthcare, initial response, fast response, trying, and I think some of the member states as well now are moving to the next stage. And this is important how we are going to be dealing with the economic crisis. There is the economic crisis that is coming, and we have to be sure that we do our best to spare, any kind of effects that could be spared by decisive action. It's important that BSEC, being, as I already mentioned, the economic organization, to try to do some of the things that could be done. And I don't speak here only about the secretariat. I think it's important for the bank. I think the bank itself should be part of the recovery efforts, because, the bank itself, I think, should try to find the right way, to provide liquidity and financing in addition to what is already on the table just because of the coronavirus. It's important that we revive some of the structures that have not worked for so long, like, the business council. It's we should try to find a way to put the business community together. And because we can say that, there is no difference in what the tourism industry is asking in Greece, in Turkey, in Bulgaria, in many of the member states. They are asking the same thing. And I think the same goes as a response for the others, because, if you look into all this tourist debate, you can say that there is a separation between incoming, countries that provide most of the incoming, and the host countries that, rely a lot on the tourism as part of the GDP. So I think it's important that we come with some common ground that would facilitate tourism between the countries. We should not forget that geographical proximity means that you can do a lot of things by road. There was a lot of work in the past about transportation. I think one of the areas that BSEC was pretty successful was in the road transportation. I remember all this discussion about trucks and how we can facilitate trade between the member states, and good means of transportation, and going faster through the borders. I think it's one of the key things that have to be preserved. This time could be not only about trade, it's about tourism, it's about cars, it's about normal citizens. It's important that we look into a common set of issues that should be respected, and in order to gain the confidence of the people coming for tourism, but in the same time as well to try to repair and fix one of the sectors that has been so badly hit. I think we should as much as open as we should be open and transparent in what we are doing. The flag of BSEC should be seen as a guarantee of transparency of exchange of information about what each of the countries are doing. Now we see so many formats. Now this crisis was a great opportunity for creating formats that did not exist before. And you don't have only East versus South in Europe, South, so you created, there are some formats that were not there, and I think the expectation should be higher from the formats that already exist, like the BSEC. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a survival competition between many of these formats. How many are going to be able to be preserved, and how many could as well use the opportunities of the crisis in a positive sense, and in the same time they should compete as well in what they could provide to the member states, because at the end, an organization is something that you join and you stay in if it gives a value added for you and gives value added for your citizens. So it's very important as well that how the BSEC of after the coronavirus is looking, and what are the ideas that we could put on the table, including, of course, not only just for brainstorming, but at the level of the formal ministerials or summits or whatever things that we should try to organize. As I mentioned, taking advantage of the fact that you can do a lot more things these days, because you don't need physically to be in the same room. We can do like we are doing it today. So I think you can even increase the level of meetings, and we've almost no expenses. So this is what I had in mind to say and to share with you. And once more, thank you for the initiative. BSEC was missing from the landscape, and it's important that now we have his voice heard, and and we give as well a message back in the capitals that there is BSEC as well is focusing on things that could help all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your remarks and raising critical issues such as how cooperation in sectors like tourism or transportation can be achieved, but above all for being optimistic and seeing this crisis as an opportunity for more. To give the floor to Ambassador Selim Yenel for your remarks received on the basis of this crisis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for BSEC and ICBSS. I'm very happy to be able to see old friends. And as you know, BSEC is a fond memory for me, having worked with Ambassador CHRISTIDES so closely. Therefore, I'm very happy to be able to be back again with the family. Having said that, and at the risk of repeating what my two previous speakers have said, I'd like to say a few points. Firstly, with regard to this crisis, I don't think that any country, with a few exceptions, was actually ready to meet it. Everybody expected it to be local. They probably thought that geographical distance would, protect them. And like generals, fighting the last war, politicians were fighting the last virus. So people didn't really take it so seriously until it was too late. Now, with, of course, what happened in China, it's not like in SARS 10 years ago, because travel is now much, much easier. And therefore, they were able to travel within the country, which was not previously possible for Chinese, and also without. And if the Secretary General will remember, last year around this time, we were having a meeting about bringing Chinese tourists to the region. I'm glad we didn't. But that was something that we had talked about at that time. Now, I think that almost all regional organizations failed. But the failure is not because of the organizations themselves. It is because of the member states. They did not take it seriously either. Every country worked for itself. There was no solidarity. We saw what the EU has done. The two previous speakers have explained it. Yes, there was a lack of solidarity. Now they're trying to make up the difference, but it was there. And the same thing with regard to the regional organizations, including BSEC. unfortunately, nobody thought of cooperating with each other. They closed down borders and that was it. However, for example, you could actually help each other by sending material, which Turkey did to some countries, and sending expertise. So these are the things that were lacking. We didn't think of it as such. We had previous disasters, yes. We had earthquakes, we had forest fires. Even then, we had difficulties in cooperating with each other. But this is an issue, this is a virus that has affected all countries, all members. So we had to come together. We didn't. And this is something that's ironic because there is no politics involved in this. No politics whatsoever. This is something that is actually a prime example for cooperation in which BSEC could have done it. But again, I repeat, it's not the fault of the organization. If there is no political will behind it, if there are the countries that don't want to or even think of it, then what can the organization do? What it can do is to make itself known, which is, I think, what the Secretariat is trying to do right now. It has to make itself remembered, remembered. That, I think, is the first lesson. Now, we have some, let's say, mechanisms inside BSEC. There are the working groups with regard to emergency assistance and healthcare and pharmaceuticals. These are essential, but maybe we could also create a working group on disaster management. And how this would function is that it would bring in both man-made and natural disasters. And actually, we should work for the next crisis. Unfortunately, we will probably face another crisis of similar sort in the future, but we should be ready for it. And the best way to do it is to set some standards, because, as I said, each country had taken measures which were different. Some of them have locked down in different age groups. Some of them had herd mentality. Everybody had a different kind of, let's say, reaction to the crisis. So if BSEC could, or some other organizations as well, could set some standards on how to defeat or meet the next crisis, that could go a long way. I believe that BSEC could actually write it down, because this is the actual way of doing it, and present it to the countries that, look, if we're going to fight it together, this is the way that we should move. And I agree with Ambassador CIAMBA that there is no excuse anymore of not participating to meetings. This crisis, I mean, the benefit of the crisis is that it showed that we can actually be together more often. In my organization, we have now more participation to meetings. And here also, there is no excuse not to participate unless there's another meeting. And so this goes also, for example, participation from capitals. In the past, I remember that BSEC had problems of meeting a quorum. We had 5 or 6 maximum members. Now, in the future, I do hope that nobody will be able to say that this is not possible. And nobody should have a technical excuse that we are far away, we're not actually there. No, this is something that should be avoided. Another issue is to manage science. Yes, this was mentioned that it's very important, but again, we've seen that certain leaders in certain countries have belittled it. They have not really taken care or believed in science. And this is, of course, a ridiculous situation. Fortunately, in our region, in BSEC region, this is not the case. But again, we should make it very pronounced. I just want to say that we have to prepare ourselves for the next disaster. And to do that, I repeat myself, that we should set our working groups, either merge the ones that I just mentioned into a disaster management, or use them accordingly to write a couple of standards on how to meet it next time, how to cooperate amongst each other, not just internally, but along with other countries as well. I think this is the way out, and this is the way in which this BSEC could make itself, let's say, put itself on the map again. It has to remind itself. It has to remind our member states that BSEC is there and it is doing valuable work. Otherwise, again, people will go, their own way, and we will unfortunately suffer the consequences. I've seen that there was cooperation, but all bilateral, nothing through the organizations. Even in the EU, this was the case. So I just want to repeat that this is very important. For example, I just took notes of things that have been said. Tourism and transport, crucial. But if the country does not open itself to tourism, then how will that be happening? For example, now Turkey is expecting, as a tourist, hosting country, from others to come to Turkey. But unless we are sure that the people coming, the tourists coming, are virus-free, that's not going to happen. We understand that, for example, Russia is not going to send tourists for a long, long time. So tourism is already suffering. Same with transport. So there will be some kind of maybe a passport, as we have heard, with regard to showing the person to be virus-free. Maybe BSEC could work on that as well. A BSEC area passport in which you can show when you're traveling between countries that this is something that the persons traveling are free of the virus. I don't know. These are ideas that should be floating around, and we should be thinking about how to manage our own region. Otherwise, we will just be talking about this, but I think the time has come for real action. And I think I should stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your talk, and also for raising the issue of participation in that kind of meetings, which I find very interesting, that in the future there will be no excuse for absence from the moment the technology can help. And the Armenian delegation has sent a question especially about this, how the new technologies used during the novel coronavirus era will possibly open the door for more meetings and more integration. In the question session, we're going to discuss this. Now, I want to give the floor to Dr. Zabelin in order for him to offer his perspective on regional cooperation. Dr. Zabelin.
Thank you very much for introduction. Dear colleagues, I'd like to speak more in a more general manner. I would say, let me speak like a scholar. In this particular case, I would like to touch upon some issues concerning the ongoing situation. First, I'd like to stress on the role of the nation state and regionalism in the period after the end of coronavirus. I think that the nation state is going to prove its role as the main element of the global governance system. A new renationalization of states is taking place right now. We can witness that. And to resolve the global problems, it is necessary to establish in close interaction between the institution of the national states with interstate and supranational associations, and not oppose them to each other. Interstate and supranational pillars of global governments should only reinforce each other. Yes, it is difficult to predict on how tough measures to limit civil liberties are justified given exceptional circumstances. Will be cancelled after defeating a pandemic. Whether we need to combat it will be used to solve particular domestic political task. Who knows? Today we can see that the solidarity of European countries among themselves was subjected to a rigorous examination. Immediate closure of borders between EU countries, temporary liquidation of the Schengen zone will remind of themselves for a long time. The solidarity of individual EU countries with the governing bodies of EU and vice versa can also be rethought. For Europe as a whole, and for the European Union in particular, the problem of freedom of movement has an urgent migration component. Pandemic overlaps with new aggravation of the EU borders in early March, resulting in the resumption of the flow of controlled migration EU borders. It can be predicted that a pandemic will only exacerbate, at best, resolve disagreements in the EU between member states regarding the reception and placement of migrants and refugees in the territory of the association. The blow will surely be delivered on the principle of freedom of movement within the Union. A number of restrictions on which may persist after the end of the crisis. That's why it is already obviously plain that many countries will go into recession, and in its scale will be compared, we will have exceeded the crisis 2008, 2009. Tens of thousands of enterprises go bankrupt. It's obvious, we can witness that right now. First of all, among small and medium-sized businesses, unemployment rates will skyrocket. Social total inequality. And the most affected countries, maybe some countries of the EU, were in early April were the main epicenters of the epidemic. The ongoing pandemic reveals not only health problems, but raises questions about the commitment of people in states of solidarity, their ability to overcome differences, the relationship between mutual assistance and self-interest. So the world will recover, and we hope it will be soon. But will our world become better or worse after COVID-19? I believe the current crisis provides a big amount of opportunities to show this in the future. So thank you very much. That's what I would like to say right now for this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zappelin, for your remarks and for placing your talk in the context of the dilemma on how the world might look in the future. What I propose to do now is 2 rounds of questions, starting with you, Dr. Zappelin, and in the last one again with Minister MITOV. And I propose for Ambassador CHRISTIDES to make perhaps some final remarks if he likes to do so in the end. I tried to collect the main points from the questions of our participants, if I may, because there are several questions asked. The first is about the importance of digital cooperation in the Black Sea region. And another question which I find interesting is up to what extent the organization is prepared to expand its cooperation on the basis of multilateralism and also under the UN framework. I would suggest 2 or 3 minutes for each speaker in order to make the discussion more interesting for our online audience. Dr. Zappelin.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, it's really in order to discuss today the problems and issues that are of so much interest and consideration as for the coordination and cooperation in the Black Sea region after the COVID-19 era. More specifically, I can't say some concrete things about that because as an expert in some concrete area, I would rather skip that point to discuss from now because it is really a specific task for me. If maybe some concrete questions are there to be asked, I would like to answer right now.
Thank you, Dr. Zapelin. Now I give the floor to Ambassador Yenel, just reminding the questions for our audience that is perhaps joining now, which is the importance of technologies for more online meetings, and in that regard for more cooperation, and also up to what extent the BSEC is expected to expand collaboration with other regional organizations following this COVID-19 crisis. Ambassador Yenel.
Well, thank you very much. I also already alluded to that this is, I think, one of the side benefits of the virus, that we have been able to understand how we can use technology more often. And as my Armenian colleague had mentioned a few times before, he always had advocated such meetings using video conference. And now this is a reality. It was forced upon us, but this has happened. And we've seen the benefits of it. Actually now, as I said, we have more participation. And to repeat myself, there is no excuse not to participate. With regard to cooperation with other regional organizations, we are already doing it. I participated last year in a meeting with other regional organizations in Barcelona. And I'm sure that this will open the way for participation even on a greater scale, because it was always difficult to host these meetings for a number of reasons, financial and other. Again, no more excuses for these things. The only thing you have to do is find a date, a proper date, and then everybody will be there. And there are a couple of international or regional institutions that could be very helpful with regard to cooperating on finding solutions to the next crisis. Therefore, I think that this technology has to be accentuated and used even more often. And I think that this is one benefit that we should be very happy that we are able to use through technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador CIAMBA.
Thank you too. So, first of all, I think just to underline what I said before, it's, we need to have an economies of scale type of approach. And first and foremost, I think it's for the BSEC to decide where it can do better than in other areas. Technology, I think it's important. The sharing technology between us is important. And the fact that we should as well transform the organization with a technological means is important. So I think I am looking forward to have a BSEC that has more technology in and has a value added, not only because of the exchanges of technology between the member states, but itself, is going to pioneer bright ideas about technology in the region. But at the end, it's about economies of scale. So I think BSEC should do what is better equipped to do, especially when it comes to the things that we have to do in the next couple of months. And this is the reason I put this emphasis on economics, on transportation, on tourism. And on the second one, we advocated all the time about a closer relationship of the EU and BSEC. And we were happy that during our presidency, it was done first and only time, I think, that we have been able to do a joint event, and Ambassador CHRISTIDES played a pivotal role in organizing it, and we have been able to do the meeting of the foreign ministers, of both EU and the BSEC, and this was really a highlight of where BSEC should be closer to, because of course we can do more about being BSEC and other regional organizations, but first I think it's a great opportunity to really enhance the European Union ties, especially when it's going to come with economic recovery, when it's going to come relationship about the bank, what of the things could be done. I think we should use the fact that 3 member states are members of the Union, and as well, I think they're, and the presidency, which is Romania, it's a member of the Union, and we are putting forward our good will to try to find which are the aspects that could be better put at use. And of course, then we have a lot of regional cooperation in the area, that has to be revived. But first of all, I think it's important to strengthen EU-BSEC ties. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Minister MITOV, your take on these issues?
I think more or less what needs to be said was already said on these issues, and clearly when it comes to technologies, we have discovered already that we don't need to fly as often as we did in the past. We can practically produce efficient meetings, take decisions, and have quite a meaningful discussion in the format in which we are right now. But plus, of course, answer questions and connect to people who are interested in the topics discussed. So for a lot of the international organizations, this is going to be not only a temporary crisis mode of operation, but I think it will become more and more a permanent way to conduct business. That's on the one hand. For sure, technologies will lead as well to certain shifts of how the labor market operates. But that's probably something which regional organizations like BSEC can also be included in this type of discussion and share the experience of the different nation states. When it comes to the freedom of movement and so on, which was heavily affected, of course, by the crisis, I wouldn't be so worried about the freedom of movement inside the European Union. That's one of the pillars of the European unity in general. And little by little, the European Union countries are going to restore the freedom of movement within the Union itself. To me, the biggest question is what happens when it comes to the help we were discussing about the tourist sector and the travel between countries which are not members of the European Union and others. That's where the issue of trust is, which I was alluding about in the beginning, is extremely important, because we are witnessing right now quite a kerfuffle of accusations and suspicions that some of the countries are actually, certain countries are actually distorting the data, their national data, in order to present themselves in a better light, which is a risk for others. If we are going to open the tourist market, we need to be sure that we apply certain steps in our reporting and in our healthcare systems. And here for sure, BSEC has a role to play when it comes to coordinating those standards. In the future, because part of the question was how BSEC will relate to other regional organizations, but not only that, but also global organizations like the United Nations. For sure, BSEC needs to identify important topics for itself and bring them to the attention of the United Nations, for example. Here, Ambassador Yanel was mentioning very correctly that we need to prepare for the next pandemic. Viruses mutate. Pandemics have been part of human existence for centuries, if not thousands of years, of course. And we need to be aware of the fact that unifying certain type of sanitary standards and healthcare system requirements is something regional organizations and global organizations like the United Nations can work on.
Thank you, Minister, for your answers. We are proceeding to the last round of questions, and I received a very interesting question about vulnerable children, and I'd like to encourage you to discuss how the BSEC can deal with inequalities in this difficult period, because we hear a lot about geopolitics, trade, transportation, but how about inequalities? I believe it's an issue that needs to be addressed, as well as also about sustainable maritime cooperation on the basis of this COVID-19 crisis. I propose we keep the same order. This is the last round of questions, so feel welcome also to include your final remarks in your answer. But I strongly encourage you to answer this question about inequalities, because I believe it's very important. And as I said before, Ambassador CHRISTIDES will provide the final remarks in the end. So Minister MITOV, please.
When it comes to inequalities, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure whether I can give a good answer to how BSEC can be instrumental in this regard. The question is extremely meaningful. Indeed, the children are a victim of all this. And the only thing I can, which comes to my mind first, is the potential of the online education. Here we need to, of course, stratify by age and so on. But it's an enormous burden on the parents on the other side. And when the parents are not prepared for this, children suffer immensely as well. To me, the most important thing, of course, is the economic recovery, and then of course we need to think of measures which can deal with the question of inequality. That is an extremely complex question, and unfortunately, the regional organizations, I don't believe they have sufficient instruments in order to deal with this type of issue. To a great extent, the tools are in the hands of the nation states, which is reasonable, of course. And the only way a regional organization could be instrumental in this if the nation states coordinate better the efforts or somehow in order how to tackle inequality.
Thank you, Minister MITOV. Ambassador CIAMBA.
Thank you too. You know, it's very frankly, I'm not very clear what you are referring to, because you know we have two aspects. You know, one is cohesion. You know, the issue is if some states have been more hit by than others, and of course you have the issue of how you have convergence. So, you know, I think in BSEC we have countries with very different economic GDPs per capita, and in the same time we have to see who was more badly hit, because if you look, we at the end of the crisis we are going to, we should not take only into account, of course, who is more affected, but in the same time the need for cohesion in the region and trying to have, you know, the level of economic development equal between countries that are part of a regional organization, because if their differences are too big, this type of organization is going to be very difficult to function. Of course, we cannot be all of us like the European Union, but in the same time, it's important that some of the you know, the things that are going to be provided for states should take into account not only how badly they were affected, but in the same time, what are their needs anyhow in terms of different sectors of economic activity. When it comes to inside, so to say, a country, and it's clearly that this crisis has been one of the stimulators, so to say, of more inequality, because of course it's about, as mentioned by Daniel, about education. It's about the fact that, of course, poorer the regions where you know, less good quality of healthcare it would have. So what the discussion we have in Europe is making one of the main benchmarks of real convergence, the healthcare sector. I think one of the lessons learned of this crisis is that we have to be sure about the quality of the healthcare sector as one of the, one of the main indicators of real convergence, because we are speaking about poverty, we are speaking about a lot of other factors, but we have neglected the health sector, and it's very important that as we are speaking now about the possibility of a second wave, next time to be better prepared. And I think that strengthening the health sector and inside this country, having equal opportunities in terms of the health treatment is going to be crucially important. So thank you for all the contributions. I think it was a good discussion, and of course, I was more than happy to attend and to try to looking forward to see how some of these ideas we put here are going to be represent value added for the organization, how the organization is going to try to see the priorities, the change priorities for the next period of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador CIAMBA, for your remarks. Ambassador Yenel.
Thank you. And I would like to also agree with Foreign Minister MITOV that it's basically a national issue. It's very difficult for regional organizations to get into these inequality issues. Basically, inequality stems from opportunities, lack of opportunity with regard to education or health, as Ambassador CIAMBA has mentioned. Therefore, the only thing that we can do as an organization is to explain best practices that we have. If we can show that this is something that we're doing on this area, for example, on schooling. Again, there's online schooling, but it cannot be done everywhere. There are other ways of doing it. So one member can explain it to others. I think that's the only way we can move on inequalities, explaining the best practices that happen here and there, sharing experiences. With regard to the maritime question, I think that as air travel will be more and more cumbersome, this might be an opportunity to increase maritime transport, especially in our region because of the Black Sea. The name goes quite normally with that. There could be more and more travel by the sea. This is something that could come up now more often, as I said, because air travel, as we're seeing it, all the explanations and the way in which the air travel is now being, not only the air travel itself, but going to the airport, it's going to become very, very burdensome. So maritime transport could be a way out, especially in our local regions. Lastly, with regard to what I can say is, we have called, I think, on the UN. I mean, as an organization, we've called on the UN to have a special session how to meet these challenges. But again, we had called upon it a few weeks ago. My question to myself is whether the UN can get together in September, or will it have to have, again, a Zoom meeting? Will our foreign leaders be able to go to New York or not? So this is going to be a unique situation for the UN as well. I think that no matter what, we all have to come together, whether it's regional organizations, international organizations, and meet head on, explain to ourselves, do some soul searching, what went wrong and what we can do in the future to make it right. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for seeing old friends again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Yenel. Dr. Zabelin.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to add some points to what was said by distinguished colleagues about the role of, and as I said in my introduction points, that the role of national state is playing nowadays an important role to solve the problem with the coronavirus situation, and it's really crucial situation, and we cannot say about the regional cooperation in the format that we used to say, let's say 6 months earlier, back in 2019, before the outbreak of the coronavirus epidemic. So first of all, the states, the national states, should resolve their interstate issues first of all, to see what's right, what's wrong, how it goes, and what should be done the next step, as it was said in our discussion before, that we are expecting a new wave to come over. So I just dare to repeat the words I used earlier, that not to predict, but to solve the problems more than the contemporary problems with the situation, is to focus on dealing with interstate issues. That I think that at this point, it's very important to keep in mind. Maybe a little bit later, or on the next step of this situation, we can summon some thoughts on how to combat the coronavirus or some other pandemic issues together jointly by cooperating through the international organizations like European Union, like BSEC, and so on. I think that's a crucial point of view from that point, from that moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zabelin. Before I give the floor to Ambassador CHRISTIDES for his last remarks, I should say that our online discussion will be uploaded on the website of the International Center for Black Sea Studies. I see that there are some additional questions as well as remarks. I should say that this is not the end of the process. By contrast, this is the beginning of the process, and more discussions will follow. And I would like to commend also George Mitrakos and Georgia Hadzi, who are the architects of our online discussion today. They are very much looking forward to receiving papers on the basis of our discussion. And I think it is an excellent opportunity to strengthen research in difficult times, because many people are staying home. We hear so many nice proposals about cooperation in the Black Sea region. So why not writing more papers and doing more brainstorming before some decisions might be reached at the political level, for example? So Ambassador CHRISTIDES, last but not least, your final remarks on the basis of our discussion.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned Mr. Mitrakos and Georgia Hadzi. I want to thank them also very much for their help and support. It has been crucial. You know, you said that I would be drawing some conclusions from these discussions, but to tell you the truth, more than conclusions, I have been feverishly noting all the very important views and remarks and suggestions that I heard from our distinguished speakers, whom I seize the opportunity to thank again for being with us today. I have taken good notice, and I hope that the people in our member states, in the ministries of foreign affairs responsible for BSEC, have been taking notes also of what has been said, because I believe they indicate some very interesting and novel ways of making our organization, but generally speaking, regional cooperation much more relevant, more comprehensive, and more productive. I mean, I took note of how important technology might be, and surely we will make use of it. I took note about the importance of the economic recovery and what cooperation between the member states of our organization can contribute to that. I'm very happy that two of the issues that were mentioned as very important, like tourism and transportation, are the immediate next items on which we will be focusing with the working group meetings, video working group meetings. And of course, I took also note about the inequalities. To tell you the truth, on a transnational level, the BSEC organization is very accustomed to inequalities, or if you want better, differences, because we all know that it isn't a homogeneous group of member states. We have different historical background, different levels of economic development, different contacts to some, let's say, big players in the region like the EU and so on. But we have dealt with these differences, and I believe we have dealt with success with all these differences. You know, what I would like to keep from all this discussion is that the coronavirus, if it serves as an awakening so that states can understand that cooperation among them is the crucial key for addressing, let's say, pandemics like the coronavirus or other disasters or, let's say, extraordinary situations, then it has played an important positive role. So for us, at least, it is an awakening. We will try harder to be able to serve the interests of our member states in a more efficient and effective way. But of course, let us always keep in mind that a regional organization, or if you want, an international organization, at the end of the day, it is always what its member states want it to be or want it to do. So in order to improve, we need a greater support and involvement of our member states, and I believe that this is the case of all international organizations. I want to end by sharing the optimism of some analysts who say that, as I mentioned in my introductory statement, that this coronavirus pandemic might prove to be important because it gives us lessons that international cooperation is vital, important, and however introspective we are at the beginning of a disaster like that, the solution, and a much more, let me say, a solution valid more in years, in terms of time, can only be reached through the cooperation of nations. So I would like to end there, and thank you also, Mr. Moderator, for your delicate task of moderating this webinar. And I want to say that, as you mentioned, this is not the first, and it's certainly not the last. Many more will follow, so that we can bring to ourselves, to the people who hear us, and to our member states, all these refreshing views and suggestions that have been put forward today. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you, Ambassador. With this positive note, I want to thank our distinguished panelists, Minister MITOV, Ambassador CIAMBA, Ambassador Yenel, and Dr. Zabelin for being with us, as well as the online audience and for the questions they sent us and for the participation. I'm looking forward in staying in touch with you, and I wish you a very good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful seeing you.
Thank you and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.